That's it. Yeah, I scored 98% at the Odoo 18 certification. It's not so bad. Don't forget to tell me when the live starts. Oh, okay. Hello everyone and welcome to this new Odoo Insider session. So today, as you see, so is that Antoine Neuvel who is giving the session and the regular Q&A. It is me, Antoine Rousseau, a partner advisor as well. And we'll see today indeed, so you can ask any questions that you have, like technical or functional. And actually, about the agenda of the next sessions, you will see that it is the case as well for the 2 next weeks that you will see for the 2 next Thursdays. However, maybe some of you have noticed that today it was supposed to be maybe a session about Swiss payroll localization. Just for you to know, it's going to be the case, but in a near future, in let's say on the 6th of March, that we'll have a dedicated session for that. Because as maybe some of you know, like the new localization for Swiss payroll has been released on 17 already now, and it's going to be released on Odoo 18 starting from next Monday. So keep in mind that those deadlines in mind, start using the tool, and if you face any questions and you would like to address it to us, feel free to ask then on the 6th of March, as I said. Also, just know that I will be there on the 6th of March, along with Jürgen, who is the developer who developed the localization. So he will be probably able to answer any kind of questions that you may have. Okay, great. So now let's take a look at the questions. And there is already one in the chatter from Emmanuel, who asks us, okay, hello Antoine, I need to display the barcode of a product on the line of the PDF report of the delivery note, but apparently you have to modify a view of the aggregated lines inherited from the main view, and there it becomes complicated. And it's true that this topic of modifying the lines of a delivery note is very complex. Let's maybe see first why it's the case and then try to solve it. So if I, for example, go in the inventory application and jump into a delivery here, so I have, for example, here the lines that are displayed. And if I want, I can indeed, in that case, so you mentioned delivery note, I guess it's a delivery slip. But I mean, any kind of report would follow the same process. And so here, so we print it, and indeed, so for now we don't have the barcode of the product that is added. So we would need to add it, let's say, next to the column here on my PDF. The issue is that the record we are on, and in that case, is a stock picking. So a stock picking. But it's the case. So this model is the same if we go, for example, to a receipt order. We are still on a stock picking model, or let's say actually maybe even a manufacturing order. I think it's the same. No, in that case not. But for let's say internal transfer, we get the same kind of model. So what we see is that it can be shared, let's say, among different kind of reports. And let's say and record in Odoo, and also in different possible status. Like you can have a receipt or a delivery order in draft, ready, done, even maybe cancelled. So different kind of status that may change also the way the data are displayed in the PDF. Anyway, we could try indeed to modify it, at least to try to understand the principle behind it. So here, let's maybe just check first if we can find a product that contains a barcode, that we can make sure it's properly displayed. So let's do it, okay, with a bolt, why not? And here, I'm going to add a barcode to it. And then here, I'm just going to add my bolt to my delivery, 20 like this. And then we're going to try to add it then to the PDF. So for that, I use Studio. Of course, you could do it in a different way. You could develop a module as well. Just for you to know, it's true that at Odoo, as I said, regarding the complexity of the model and the report, we usually decide not to do it with Studio, but to, let's say, integrate it in a module at that moment, because we want to target every possible case, and it takes a bit of time. So here we can see the principle, but maybe we'll not achieve the right result, let's say, on the spot. But if I go to the XML view here, so what we can try, no, actually not this one, of course, I need to go first in my report and open my delivery slip, and here try to edit the sources. And so here, what I need to target is, let's say, the part of my view that is, yes, here referring to the table itself. So here I have the order, shipping date, and here we start going inside of my table. in which I can find, so here if I increase it a bit, even for me, yes, like this. So first the product move, then the quantity, and finally, and then the quantity, but then it could depend probably on some criteria. So here I see packaging quantity, yes, and this one is packaging quantity. So it's probably changing depending on the unit of measure or the things that you are using upon. No, okay, it's because of the order and delivered quantity. Okay, good. So that's why. So here we see, let's say, all these different fields in my XML view. So if I take a look at the corresponding PDF on the left here, so I need to dezoom a bit. So that corresponds to 3 columns that we have. So what we could try is indeed to add, let's say, a field to that PDF. But first, I need to know if the field is part of my model. And so for that, I need first to modify then the backend itself. So I could try to open Studio here and edit the list view and add a related field to my model. So it will start from my product. And no, in that case, display the barcode of my product. Like this. So here, let's say I would call it rated barcode, that we are sure to recognize it. Nice. And so just to make sure it works, let's come back to the actually any of them is not important. If I add again my bolt, great, I see that my rated barcode is displayed. That's the first step, and then I need indeed to modify the view itself. So what we can now try to do, and of course I need to have access to the field name as well. So I'm just going to go there and type related barcode. So it's going to be at the bottom. Very good. And now I can just go in my report, edit the source again. So here I'm going to do something that I should not do, which is to modify the view itself. Of course, afterwards you need to do it through an inherited view to make sure it works. But let's try first to add it to the body of my report and see if it works. And so for that, what I would first do is to add a title to my table. So here, and to call it, let's say, barcode. So here, if I save, I should get a new column in it. Great. And then I need to add the corresponding value in my table. And that's what I could do by probably here copy this section there. But the difference is that I will not display my product ID. I'm going to display this field that I have here to give maybe a sample value. Great. And here there is a TIF. Well, actually I don't need it in that case. So if I save now, great. So here, of course, I don't see it because it's a sample test. But if I go back to my PDF here and try to print my delivery slip, yes, great. So I see my barcodes that are added to my delivery slip. So I guess that it's a way then of doing it. Of course, as I said, you need to check it in different cases. So for example, if I validate now my delivery slip and try to print it again, we can check if yes or no, it's still going to be displayed in the same way. No. So you see, that's where the issue occurs. And that's where you need to be careful to make sure to target any kind of situation you may have. And let's try to just figure out why it didn't work in that case. So if I go back to my source, that's probably because, yes, here indeed. So what I did is to modify the first section of my table, which was this one, which was probably depending, yes, here on a state that is different from done. But as long as I move from my done to my done state, which is the other one, then here state is equal to done, I have a different situation. And here indeed, so I need to do the same process again and to add, let's say, my barcode on that page. Let's try. I mean, we never know if we succeed to do it now. No, we'll not do it like this. I'm just going to copy it. Now, same. To call it barcode. great, but then it's not over. What I need to do then is to add it again. Here is in my report, and here I have a small comment, indeed, because here I have indeed a few use cases that make it a bit more complicated. So a small text that explains that to me. Depending on many different situations. For example, if you use serial numbers, if you use packages as well, so it may be different. And so that's why here, indeed, we start going in the section that Emmanuel told us about the aggregated lines, which make it even more complicated. So yes, so that's probably, as I said, a bit too advanced to change it in that place, but let's maybe try first to take a look at the code itself. Okay. Okay, great. And then we arrive here. Considers are not delivered. Yeah, it's a bit more advanced. It's probably a bit too advanced, I think. I mean, to do this kind of stuff at that place, it would require a bit more investigation to make sure to do it in the right way. So unfortunately, we cannot go one step further. But what I just want to insist on is that here, indeed, maybe playing with Studio is a bit also to at a too low level to modify this kind of report. I need to see it with a, let's say, a larger overview to make sure to modify the report accordingly. Okay, so let's maybe try now to go to the next question. Okay. Is there a way, so from Salia on LinkedIn, is there a way to identify during the scan of newly arrived products in stock the order of each customer? In other words, when scanning the product, we'll be able to recognize that this product belongs to that customer. Okay, so here, if I properly understand your question, you would, let's say, start from the assumption that if you decide to purchase a good incoming in your stock, it's going to be reserved automatically to a client at that moment. First you need to make that logic inside of Odoo, and for that you have, let's say, one specific case that could work is the fact of, let's say, activating in the roots of my inventory. So if I go to my settings and take a look at the roots, here I have a root that is archived by default, which is the MTO that I can then unarchive in that case. And if I activate that root on one of my products, for example, let's take the acoustic block screen there. And if I decide to sell that good to one of my clients, like this, and let's imagine 5 of them. If I confirm, automatically Odoo is going to create a purchase order linked to my sales order. And that straight link that we have in between is a way first to get the information that indeed what you're going to purchase to my vendor is going to be reserved to my client. So for example, here in that case, you could let's say retrieve in the database itself, I mean, the name of the client that is linked to that purchase order, which is which is pretty obvious. Then in your case, the question, if I remember well, can you come back to the question just at the top? Yes, perfect. And the question is, okay, when scanning products. So I mean here that you start from the assumption that you want to, let's say, use a barcode application to record the entry of goods in your database, which is this one. Which is then, if by default, of course, scanning the corresponding receipt order. So let's try actually if you can do it. So if I took a look at my operation, received, and in that case it was the receipt number 10. So it is this one. So here indeed I could decide to let's say to scan my goods. But if I want to add an information here on my screen, it's going to be much more complicated because like I am in front of an interface that is pretty different from the ones that we have, let's say, outside of Odoo. It's a JavaScript interface. So if you want to add an information here linked to the client, which exists, I agree with you. So we could indeed add that information in the database. You need here to add it in the interface and to modify the JavaScript of that interface, which is, let's say, once again, a development so that we cannot see here. But what you could do in a different way, for example, is to say, okay, at some point, maybe, in order to know what are the goods that are coming in your stock, you could decide once again to print here the receipt order that you are supposed to receive today. And on that receipt order, a bit as we discussed just before with the corresponding, let's say, modification of the report, you could decide to add here the information linked to the client directly on the PDF. And for that, you need to proceed step by step. So first, try to find here the name of the client directly on the purchase order. So let's try quickly if I can do it. So I think that's the first one. No, it was not the first one. Okay, let's start from the sales order. It's true that I don't see it here. Purchase order number 1. Okay, that's because it has the same vendor, I guess. Okay, so this one. So here first, let's try to see if I can, in a way, retrieve the name of my client. So if I take a look, no, it does not. It doesn't work because the link is not straight in between. And also the thing is that you could probably get as well a purchase order that is linking the purchase of different goods per sale. So probably here the link could be done mostly maybe on the lines itself, but same, you could be in a situation maybe where lines are coming from different sales order and that purchase the goods of those goods, at the same time for different clients. So the situation is not as easy as it looks. So we'd here maybe get a lot of different cases that could happen. But if you succeed to display it in a way, or if you have assumptions to say, no, we get every time one client per products in my lines, then you could retrieve that information back again on the receipt and try to add it on the PDF and start with the assumption that once your people receive the goods and they scan the corresponding receipt order for that goods, they know on the PDF for which client it is. But what you can see here is that this link, as I said, is not completely straightforward. And also here we start from the assumption that we use the MTO route, because if you don't, this link is not even existing at all. So it's much more complicated. Maybe in let's say a more practical way, what I would advise in that case to not go too far in the customization is for the people who are going to prepare and confirm the purchase order of that goods, is maybe here to add as a description to it. So here maybe also with a different field. Why not? Or maybe just with a note, is to explain. Here I'm on the sales order, but I want to go there on the receipt. And here, yes, on the description of the picking, to explain, okay, we expect to have this one for client 1, that when you print the receipt order, like this. So here's the delivery slip, but I guess it's the same. Yes, you see for which client it is. And so when you scan it, and of course here in that case, it would be more, of course, the picking operations. At least you know exactly for which client it is, and indeed you can try to prepare it accordingly. So yes, in that case, we don't see the description itself, but same. Then it comes to report modification. But then that's still a way that you could investigate to see if it can work. Okay, so 2 questions that are linked to inventory. I'm sorry to not be able to, let's say, show you exactly how to perform those changes. As I said, the connection and especially the customization at that level is a bit heavy. If you want to modify it, I would still advise to first look for maybe manual operations or to try to find a different way of doing it. And yes, try to avoid modifying this report, as I said, because they are quite difficult to be modified. Okay, then next question from Anhar on LinkedIn. I have a question about IoT VirtualBox. Is it possible to use it with an online service while logged in as a standard user? The purpose is to connect printers and biometric device. Is it possible to use it with an online service while logged in as a standard user? If you mean standard user, it's just that I'm not sure about what you mean. If you mean that you are, let's say, yes, just that, yeah. If you mean that you are standard from that point of view, regarding the pricing of Odoo, and that then you don't have access, to the feature on the right, Well, I'm not sure there is a link because you can still use the virtual IoT box in that case. So I would say that you can use the IoT box, virtual IoT box, if you are as a standard user. So that's possible. But then to print it, to connect it to printers and biometric device, of course, it depends on the printers and biometric device to make sure that the connection can be done. So yes, here depends on the reference. Just note that if you go, so for example here, so we mentioned about printers. So maybe you could go in the Odoo hardware POS about the point of sale here. So same, going to switch to English, in which you have like the possibilities to take a look at the printers that you have. Like those ones, some indeed that require IoT box and some that don't. And in that case, indeed, to try to see how to connect it with, let's say, the corresponding IoT box that you have. So in that case, so any printer compatible with a web browser, IoT box recommended. So if it's a virtual one, of course, you can use it. And the second point, biometric device. This point, I think, is a bit less documented. If I go at attendance hardware, here, kiosk device. Yes, because by default, you have a connection with the badges and the RFID. Once again, I need to switch to English. Yes, so for that, you will probably need to develop at some point, let's say the connection that allows you to use and to connect it, to get this biometric device to Odoo, to make it connected as well with the attendance app, because I guess that's at the end what you want to do, or with a custom app. But still, I think that requires a bit of development at that moment for the right driver to be created. But yes, just my question about that was my remark. Yes, about virtual IoT box. Let's try just first if there is any constraint that you can find here regarding the pricing. But I guess it's not the case. So IoT box subscription, so that's good. And so here in that case, it just mentioned about the Windows thing. But I don't see any remarks regarding the pricing. So I guess indeed if you are in standard, that's something that you can use. Okay. Next question on YouTube. How much time will it take to approve the Odoo domain? It's pretty fast. It should be a few days. Of course, every time we need to approve it internally. So we have a list of requests regarding the domain name and, especially the status of the client. Like, is it a client that is using Odoo for a long time? What is the sector, the industry of that client? What is the content that is displayed on the website? If you want to put as much change as possible on your site when you ask for that, try to work already on your website because it's going to be reviewed by the team to make sure that it's ready to be linked also to a domain. But it should be a question of days. Next question. Hi Anton, is it possible to launch the timer on multiple tasks simultaneously with the same user? That's a good question. And probably, yes, actually we can try, but I would say no, but we should check first if it's possible to see it. So I'm going to install. Okay, project is installed, but maybe timesheet is not in that case. Yes, great. So let's check. So just to put a bit of context, indeed, in Odoo you have, let's say, a timer that you can start when you are working on a task to make sure that you record your time accordingly without having to pay attention to it and maybe make mistakes regarding the time that you truly spend on a task. Of course, I would say that by default, in that case, we start from the assumption that we can work only then on one task at the same moment, and that we start working on another task, you need to stop the timer and start it again on another task, which is why here, when you open the timesheet app, you can start it once. I will put a description, select the corresponding task, and work on that, and then you stop it when you are done. So here what you could try is to duplicate the page, for example, and take a look. Indeed, here we see that the timer is still ongoing. And if I type on something else, you see that it's going to remove what is going at the same time here. So I would say no, then by default. And I think that's because of the logic, as I said, that you can only work on one task at the same moment, even if you could, I understand the idea that you could be working on two different tasks, but in Odoo, there's nothing that is, let's say, that is planned. I'm just thinking like for example, if we connect to it through a different browser, like maybe just, for example, in that case, no, not this one. If we go to a new incognito window, okay, I need to connect to it, of course. Okay, my password didn't work. I don't know why. Let's try again, just to check if I can connect to it. Here, what I'm going to do is to simply change my password to make sure it's going to work. Great. So now if I connect to my timesheet, I still have the timer ongoing, so that's good. But if I then connect to it, as I said, on a let's say on a different browser, yes, same, the timer is still ongoing. So yeah, this timer is linked to the user itself, not to the page or anything else. So indeed, so it's not possible to do it. So in that case, you need to indeed think differently about the way you are recording your timesheet, and that's it, unfortunately. Okay. Next question from Jérôme. Hello Antoine, we need to select specific contacts within a company to receive delivery slip and invoice. Is not always the delivery address or the invoice generator that needs to receive them. We created for it a checkbox for each contact to state if they receive the delivery slip and or invoices. Okay, after creating an email using a template, the problem is that followers of the invoice are added by default to the email recipient. Oh, we did deal with that. Okay, sorry, because the question is quite long, so I need to rethink about it first. So what you say is that you have different contacts in a database. So let's imagine companies, and that inside of the companies you have different people, which could be, let's say, some deliveries and invoicing address. But as you said, it's not always the delivery address or the invoice address that needs to receive them, which is indeed a bit strange in terms of process, then, because you want to have some flexibility, which you could do basically also by having different invoicing address. And when you start, of course, creating your sales order, here you just modify and choose the right invoice address and delivery address. So that's, let's say, the standard workflow as it is planned. In your case, you say you created, yes, sorry, come back to the question. Sorry, thank you. Yes, we created for it a checkbox for each contact to state if they receive delivery slip and or invoices. What you need to know is that the first invoice address that is going to be selected and the delivery address that is going to be selected for the co-addict is always the first one in terms of sequence. So if we just come back to that case and imagine that we have, let's say, my one invoice address that is called like this, and another one that is called like this. So as invoice one is in the first place, if I decide to create here, yes, I'm just going to remove that. If I decide to create in my sales app a sale for Azure Interior, I need to get it for the invoice one. But if I, of course, decide to move the position of invoice two, is here, especially because actually, okay, maybe my test was not good because it was still a different address. But if we start again, you will see the result will be the same here. But if I change the position here and make it in the first position, yes, and so let's make it this one as 2. Yeah. So now my invoice 2 is my first one. So here I use a trick of making a 1, of course, in front of it, but you can use different trick to make it first. So you see now it's going to be this one that is selected. So what I mean by that is that you don't really need to add a checkbox on the contact to make it work. You could decide as well just to change the name and make sure that the first one that is going to receive the delivery slip and the invoice is always the one that's going to be selected by default to ease your work. And then you mentioned that after creating an email using a template, so you need to come back to the question. Thank you. The problem is that followers of the invoice or the receipts are added by default to the email recipient. Yes, that's something same that's going to remain as it is a standard behavior of Odoo. So here, if I let's say, so here I have my invoice address, that is this one. Let's say that I want to add a product. I confirm and I create my invoice. The down payment invoice in that case, but yes, 50%. So by default here, I will get the salesperson that is a follower of the record, but it's true that any followers that would be part of, let's say, my invoice will receive by default the emails that are going to be sent by the email template. It's because when you decide to send something by emails from the interface, you always, yes, actually the interface has changed a bit. But by default here, you will always see, let's say, the contacts that are going to be notified. So if we try here to add a different follower, for example, Abigail, and if I try again to send a message, we said by default, Abigail and invoice2 are going to be used as the people to receive the email. So it's not something that you can really change in the way of doing it, because even if we take a look at the email template setup of the invoice, you will see that, like, even from on the recipient, you know, like you do not really choose to add it, you know, to the followers of the record. So that's a very standard behavior. So in that case, I think you need to just deal with that. So yes, there's, let's say, different situation of doing it. You could either decide to make some automation rules to remove followers based on some criteria, but that's complicated again because I guess it's going to change in many different cases. Or try to understand why do you have so many followers that are added, you know, on each position, knowing that if you properly, you know, if you have directly the right invoice and delivery address, you will only get on the corresponding record every time the right, you know, delivery address too. So you should not have people that are added as a follower that should not be. So maybe try first to think, why do I get those people as a followers, and then adapt accordingly the needs, well, the way of working in your database. But that may be probably the small tip of organizing your contact properly and make the ones that are more important in the first position could be a way of doing it. Okay, next question. Is it possible to customize the POS receipt so that it includes both takeaway and in-house items on a single ticket, even when they have different VAT rates? Currently, we have to print two separate receipts because VAT differs for takeaway versus in-house orders. For example, a customer enjoys a drink in store, but decides to buy a takeaway cookie when paying. Instead of generating two separate receipts, can we customize the POS to consolidate everything into one ticket while keeping the correct VAT breakdown? Very interesting question. So here, let's try to take a look at it and install the point of sale. So I think the answer is no, based on what I know from the point of sale, because when you create, let's say, an order on one corresponding table, you always, let's say, have to select one corresponding fiscal position. But still, let's try to figure it out, because there's maybe a way of having a small workaround. So here I need to activate flexible taxes on it. Like this, saying that by the default is let's say Belgium B2B, but if I want, I can add the intra-communities that we get different tax rates that will be applied. Let's see. So if I decide to be in your case, so of course I don't have a takeaway and an in-house fiscal position, but that's still the same ID. Let's first try to see it here, action, and to select, let's say, there the Belgian B2B, yes, order. Yes, sorry, because here I need to pay attention. So Belgian B2B. I don't know why I don't see the other ones. Let's just take a look at how I set it up. No. Yeah, I did not select the right one. So if I refresh my page, just to make sure, and here I come back to my order, now in the actions, I can have the choice, okay, in between. So let's imagine, yes, so here, okay, I mean, I did one product. If I add another one to it, here, if I select the action, I will be able to change, this is a whole fiscal position of the whole order, but not on the specific line that I have added. So both now are in intra-community. So that's why here we are a bit stuck, because we cannot indeed have two different orders that share, let's say the same order that share the corresponding amount. When we go to the payment afterwards, yes, we'll be a bit stuck. I mean that's because of the logic of Odoo. It's a bit complicated to see it differently, because if we just think in terms of the backend as well, when you let's say go inside of a sales order, for example, you always get one fiscal position assigned to the corresponding invoice. But what you can do afterwards is just to change, let's say, accordingly the tax amount by yourself if you really need to do it at some point, let's say in a very specific situation as the one that you described. So maybe what I would say is to do the same. Why not? Yes, I mean, it's a workaround, as I said, but let's say the other kind of possibility would be to develop something that is going to change a lot the way of Odoo is working for now. But it's to have, okay, an acoustic block screen, let's say, which is in-house, that's where you apply the 21%, and then, for example, in that case in Belgium, and then another one, which is the takeaway, 6%. Which is 6%. So that's pretty basic, but then it would allow you to select the right product when you are inside of your order, and then to have the correct corresponding tax rate that's applied. Then you could tell me, yes, okay, but I have some issues with my stock. Then it's not completely true, because what you could do is to say, okay, my takeaway product here is composed actually of every time 1 unit of my acoustic block screen. That is, let's say, yes, my in-house one with 1 unique, and it's a kit. So that every time you just actually sell one takeaway, it's going to sell and to deliver one in-house product. So in terms of stock, then you are good. So you have one main product and another one. It's a workaround. Of course, it's not always possible, but then you could have 2 different categories with the in-house and the takeaway. The only way that I see of doing things differently would be to develop, as I said, and change the behavior, which is a bit more tricky. Okay, next question. In planning module, I want to understand the concept of allocated percentage. What is the purpose of this field? If I make a planning slot between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., but allocate 1 hour, the slot will still take 2 hours and conflict with any other slot within that interval. Why is it possible to even change allocated hours? Okay. Let's try to reproduce it first. So if I go in my planning, let's say here, and take a look at one of my fields. So here I'm from indeed 7 to 11. If I add more hours, okay, I will just indeed increase the time allocated regarding here my my corresponding time, and accordingly it's going to change as well, let's say, the workload in comparison with my let's say with my schedule. So it's true that so that's indeed possible to modify the allocated time. I'm just thinking about the use case that I already faced about that. Indeed, with the occupation rate, as you mentioned also here. Let's try to imagine a case where it would be a bit different. It's true that I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense, to imagine that someone is working from 8 to 10, and that you make more allocated hours than you have, on that planning. Actually, I don't see a use case where it would make sense. But if you assign less, as you said, it could be. So as you see here, so 1 hour actually, so that is going to be performed in between 7 and 11. But as you said here, that's a really nice use case, because we actually have the same in my case. Even here, if I say 2 hours, I will still get a conflict. Actually not. Actually, the conflict has been removed in my case. Oh, well, I deleted it without, let's say, not on purpose. So here, if I add it again, so here I have 1 hour on my slot, and here I have a second time shift with 3 hours. But if I decide to put 2 and save, yes, here's going to be changed, and I don't have any conflict anymore. So that's strange. Maybe in your case you are not in the same version than me. So here I'm in Odoo 18, and it seems indeed then that I can play with the planning allocated time to make sure that I can have some, let's say, concurrent task, but with some, let's say, allocated time that match to make sure that we can do it on the same time shift. So yes, so a different, let's say, behavior that's what you get. Still take 2 hours and complete your annual slot within that interval. So I guess what you need to do if you want to avoid that conflict is to make sure that at the end you have, let's say, enough time in between the starting hour and the end hour to perform the allocated hours. So maybe in your case, what you have is that you have maybe one task that one, let's say, shift that takes 1 hour, another one that takes 3 hours. And so if the shift lasts 3 hours, you will get an issue, because you don't have enough time to perform it at the end. So that's probably why, in that case, you have an issue. But if it matches well, I guess it's going to work accordingly. So yes, try to think about it and see if that's something that you did, and maybe you can comment again on the chatter and to see if it's your case or not. Okay, next question. How can I? So from Sport Pulse on LinkedIn, how can I create a sales order and assign it to a driver in my fleet app? I run a delivery service and want to receive orders and allocate them to my fleet efficiently because I have my drivers there. Okay, well, what I know in starting from Odoo 18 is that you are now able, if you have the fleet application that is installed, which is not my case for now, you are able to assign a driver not to a sales order, but to a delivery order. So to make sure you need to, not really a driver actually, but a fleet, one of your fleet records, so a car, for example. So if I go there and take a look at my delivery, I should have a field somewhere, but I don't see it here, but let's just check if it exists already or not. So which is my, actually I could look for fleet in the rated model. No, so that's probably something that I need to activate somewhere in my database, so not there. And here, if I take a look, no. Okay, let's cheat a bit and go in the run bot, because I know this field exists and probably it's just a setting that we need to activate to make it appear. So I'm just going to go and look at the deliveries, at the delivery in my database. So it's loading. Because here it's true that I don't see, yes, if I type no, yes. So maybe just so once it's loading, just to think about the use case itself. So here, why can't you do in standard? Why can't you just assign a driver to the sales order itself? I think it's because of the logic of the logistic that you have in a company, is that when you create the quotation first and the sales order afterwards, but the quotation is the first step itself, you cannot really assign a driver to it because you don't really know if the quotation is going to be confirmed, when it's going to be the case, and so on. But once you confirm the sales order and the quotation, it becomes a sales order. At that moment, you create a delivery order, and so that's why Odoo has just defined. Okay, it's probably smarter to make it then assigned directly to the delivery order itself, to link it to one of my, let's say, vehicle in my app to make it work. So here my run bot is not working. So let's try to connect to another one. Okay, we'll try 18.1. Okay, and I don't see it here neither. Okay, and if I group it by model, it's the batch transfer. Okay, so that's why. So that's the slight difference that we have. So here, if I go on one of my batch transfer in my stock, here I can assign it to a vehicle, like this, and the vehicle being linked to one driver, usually here. That's where you get it. So yeah, that's why here you have this kind of setup. So the batch transfer is something that you can generate based on multiple transfer in your of course database, because what you could have as a situation is you know that you have multiple transfer that you want to perform at the same time. So you select all of them and you create accordingly a batch. Let's say a new batch transfer. Let's say deliveries with Nissan. Let's imagine I am the responsible in draft. All right. So once I create it, I can then assign it to my Nissan car, and we can then deliver it according to that. What is nice is that I guess if afterwards I go to my car itself, I should have, actually no, it's not displayed by default, but of course I could from a car take a look at all the batch transfers that are linked to it. I could do it with Studio here. If I probably here group it by model and once again open my batch transfer, here I could say rated deliveries, and then see it appears accordingly and see all the transfers that have been linked with that car, with the date and so on. So that is pretty useful to be seen. So that's how it is done. It's done. So it's not linked exactly to a driver, but if you want to link it to a driver only and not to a car, which I don't know, maybe could make sense in your situation, then I would do it maybe differently, because you have always the possibility, to add a responsible to it. So you could imagine that the responsible is a driver, and if the responsible is not a user in your database, then just add the information somewhere for you to know that it's that person that is going to use it. But it's all a question afterwards about what do you want to do with that information. Do you want to make some tracking, some reporting, or not? Or do you want the people to know what they are assigned to? In that case, they are probably users, so responsible could be enough. If it's about reporting and tracking of all the data, as I said, the batch transfer and the link of it to a vehicle could be enough. All right, next question. I have a database. When I try to update a third-party app from Odoo apps to my database through GitHub, I face issue like file size too big to update. Any suggestion or process to avoid it? Unfortunately, that's not an issue that I already faced in the past, so it's probably going to be a bit too technical for me to help you with that. So when you try to update it through the Odoo apps, actually, just that about the update process, just to make sure. So maybe you can comment again and see if I can have more information. I don't know if you just mean, okay, I just want to apply a change, because of a bug fix, for example, and to apply it again, or if you want to, let's say, upgrade your database to a certain version, and so update the third-party app along with it. But here, in terms of this, let's say issue of I would say in that case efficiency and possibility to make it inside of the file. Maybe also, I don't know if your app is very big. Of course, it's a stupid question, but it's important, to see if it makes sense, regarding your question that you have. Did you already try to update a third-party app that has along, almost the same size with the same number of lines or not? Like, is it a particular case or not? You could still try to contact, the support of Odoo to see if they have any advice, because of course they make this kind of update with the standard apps. So maybe that's something that they already faced. To try to optimize the apps itself and see if it's not an issue of an app that is too big and so not really efficient in the way it is done. All right. This question from Ilam on LinkedIn. So for purchase requests, I used cost centers. How to add a field with a drop-down list of the company's departments to view all the costs associated with a specific department. Okay. So here, when you mean cost center, I guess that you mention this, the analytics distribution, and here the fact that you can assign, let's say, one of your, let's say one purchase order line to one specific indeed, let's say center of cost, as in that case a project, a department, or anything like this. If that's the case, if that's not the case, I would advise you to do it like this, because it's probably the better way to answer your question. If it's not, then I don't really know what you mean by cost center in that case. So we can feel free to maybe add more details related to it. What is nice in that case, indeed you have a field here with all the departments that you can access. Those departments are coming from what we call the analytic plans that you can find. Let's do the right path. You start from accounting, you go in the settings, and you go down until the analytic accounting section. And here you start with the plans, in which you can create any plans that you want, and so it will then appear, accordingly here on your page. And for example, if I open the department one, I can then create one account per type of department that I want to follow and to track in terms of cost. For example, here, if I assign that cost to my commercial and marketing department, and I confirm, then I can, let's say, it's a dropship anyway, it's a problem. Then I can create my bill. My analytic distribution will be taken here at the same, accordingly on my bill. And once I confirm, that's it. And so if I go back to my analytic account and refresh my page, I will see in real time that now my gross margin has been modified, and so I can keep track of all the costs that are recorded on my analytic account, and also the corresponding document. So you can see it then, per, let's say, per department, but you can also take a look at the reporting on the analytic report, on which you could decide as well to group it by department and take a look, especially here, regarding, the date, for example, and how it's going to evolve, in which specific department in that case. So yeah, that's it. Okay, next question on YouTube from Mika. In social marketing, why does one social media platform posting fails to post? Example, I schedule a post for Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter is the only one that fails. That's a good question. If you yes, let's try first to maybe take a look. Actually, social marketing is installed already in my database, so I can take a look. But in that case, I won't have any data. I'm just going to check here. So tests, all right. Push notification title. Yes. So I just want to take a look if at some point, yes, here you get a failure region. If for at some point the post is not going to be posted. So it'd be interesting in that case to take a look at this reason why it didn't work. Indeed, for example, is it a connection error that is triggered? For example, in that case, then it's probably let's say an issue that you have in between Odoo and this application, and so why not try to create a support ticket for that, or try to, let's say, reconnect again your social network credentials to the database. According to your question, I guess that it's not always the same one that is going to fail. So you have some kind of let's say switch in between. So that's kind of weird. So yes, try to see if there is any frequency, any irregularities in between each of those parts, and if not, then indeed maybe try to refresh your credentials or create a support ticket, because by the end it just maybe an issue in between Odoo and one of those let's say social networks as you mentioned, which is completely impossible. Okay, that's something that can happen, of course, as it is an integration in between two parties. All right, could you explain the working process for employee attendance using RFID? Sure, exactly. So pretty, let's say, simple topic, I think. It's just that when you are willing to use, the attendance app on Odoo, you have the possibilities. So if I open attendance application, to set up and to activate many different ways for the employees to connect actually to the database. And for example, here for now we define that people can use barcode. So it's just you can have a badge to scan it in front of a barcode scanner, or a RFID in that case. And you have here multiple choice that you can see. you have an installation manual, to see it, and I think that's where we were just a few seconds ago, to try how to connect, for example, here in that case, the RFID reader. Here we recommend this one, to make sure it's connected, because here an IoT box is not needed to connect it to the database. So you need first, of course, to connect, the RFID to your computer. And then, so each let's say, RFID has a specific code that you can assign to the employees on the employee form. If I open any of them and go in the settings, here I have a PIN code that I can assign to it. No, PIN code is going to it's just going to be, let's say, a code to be used, of course, on the point of sale and on the applications to make sure that they are the ones that they are supposed to be. But here it's on the badge ID that you need to provide them the code of the corresponding RFID for the employees to make sure they can connect. So once you properly set up the employees with the right badge ID that you gave to them, then the simple thing that you need to do is to maybe add a computer or a tablet, in front of your office with the RFID reader next to it, and people, when they just come, just put your badge on it and they make the check-in, and afterwards they just do the checkout when they leave. So that's exactly the same flow as if I did it manually. So yeah, here if I go in my attendance application, if I go in my kiosk mode, and here I have the possibilities to scan my badge, and so here it just propose, of course, to do it as well with the RFID reader. Okay, so how to generate labor invoice? My company mostly does job work operation. So question from Shiva on YouTube. I guess that when you mention, let's say here, a labor invoice, you mean an invoice that is based on some, let's say, work done by person that you want to invoice to the client. So here in that case, it's a question about, okay, how are you going to record the time spent by the people on the task? And for that, you have actually different options in Odoo. So maybe let's go back to my database here. So if I go to a product like this, maybe there is already one that I can show. Service. So it's all a question about a service. So here I type that name because most of the time the products are called like this. Let's say, for example, it is IT technical maintenance. So it's a service, and when I have this, I can choose, the invoicing policy that I want to apply. In that case, I could choose prepaid. So I just agree with the client on a certain amount that's going to be invoiced, whatever happens afterwards. But I could also decide to base it on some different criteria as a timesheet, the corresponding timesheet that the employees are going to record in the corresponding app, the milestones reached, during the project, or the delivered quantity if I want to not let's say, record timesheet at all, but to manually decide what is the delivered amount of time that we made on one specific situation. Once it is, let's say, properly set up, that's pretty simple then, because you simply need to create a quotation, add the product that you have, let's say, defined accordingly. So here, IT technical maintenance. So as I said, we could agree on 25 hours to be worked. And then I confirm, and I can create the invoice directly as it is, let's say, a prefixed, a fixed amount. If I want to do things differently and say, no, actually it is based on timesheets, and so the time that people spend on the task, here I could once again duplicate it, confirm. And so now it's based on timesheet, but of course what I need to do is to make sure that I can timesheet on that corresponding task. And for that, I can decide to create, for example, a project and a task. When I confirm my order, that if I start again and duplicate my order and confirm it, I will get a project and a task that is created accordingly, and I can ask the people that are working on the corresponding project, to timesheet the time that they spend accordingly here with a certain description, and therefore the time that is recorded is going to be added on my sales order in terms of delivered quantity, and as I base my invoicing policy on the delivered time, I can then create my invoice accordingly, maybe on a regular basis, on which I can choose as well the corresponding timesheet period if I want to be very precise. And afterwards, I get here in that case a 5 hours invoiced quantity for that client. I guess that answers your question. So yes, indeed, so just to summarize, you don't always need to have some goods to be delivered to generate an invoice. You can also base it in that case, for example, on a service. Easy question. Okay, I always afraid a bit of the easy question, especially on Odoo Insider, but let's take a look. How can I edit my website without taking my current website offline? So it's just that I don't exactly know what do you mean by my current website. If it's a website that is outside of Odoo, I mean, it's not a very big problem, because you could still indeed, let's say, leave it on the side and work on your website on Odoo, because it does not have the same URL and you don't publish it at all. Just to summarize, if I go to my website here and I'm working on it, I could decide to not publish it online to make sure that people cannot access it, by mistake and see that I'm working on it at the same time. But if you mean, no, but Antoine, you'll find that here, I mean, I'm working I have an Odoo website, but I want to update it and make sure that it's going to be updated at the same moment. I would say two different cases, same that are going to be possible here. You could, for example, decide to create a new website, so this is the existing website that you could, I think, not exactly, but you could, create another one as my website 2. My website 2 being the second one will not be accessible, if you don't have a domain to access it. So you can work on the website 2, the new one, once the first one is the one that is published and accessible by the users and the clients. So that would be a way of working. And if you want to update the existing website because you don't want to start from scratch and you want to keep the existing content, in that case, same, just try to unpublish the page that you are working on as much as possible. Or maybe, same, it's just going to, for example, let's try if we can do it. Sorry. If I go on a page, is it possible? Yes, you could duplicate a page. So it could be maybe a way of doing things, is to say, okay, let's keep for now, for example, the appointment, but all of those pages are linked to one specific module in Odoo. But if you have some very specific page that you have created, let's imagine, just a blank page, as this one. And so this is my current page with all the content that I like. And then I just want to work on version 2 of that page. What I could do, this one is published, but I could go, in my pages, select my current page, decide to duplicate it. Let's say my new page. Like this. So which will have exactly the same content that I can, let's say, modify accordingly, and then, just make sure to, let's say, then remove the existing page, add a new page instead of it, and, by the end, maybe make it work. So those are a few tips. I mean, it's a bit to investigate, to be tested, but it really depends on the use case, and how many changes you want to apply, accordingly on your website. Well, I think it's maybe the right moment to make a short break, and so we come back in 5 small minutes. Hi again, and so welcome back to this Odoo Insider session. So let's directly start again with the question that I have, and especially the question from Na on YouTube that asks us, can I access Odoo source code manually in a text editor like VSCode? So as let's say as anyone, so if you are only a client from Odoo, you can only access on GitHub, let's say the source code of the community version. If you are a partner, you can access it from the enterprise version as well, and so have access to it. Then you need to download all of those files locally on your computer. For that, the best way to do it is just to take a look at the documentation that you have online to download Odoo. Let's say this one, for example. Yes, so here you can download community and enterprise, and I guess if I just click on it, actually it's way easier than before. You're just going to let's say to download all the repository of the corresponding version in your database, and then at that moment have access to it. I think I was not completely right. So as a partner, if you are an Odoo partner, an official Odoo partner, you can here have access to the enterprise GitHub repository, in which you can find all the new commits, all the communication as well around the code. But I think anyone has the possibilities to download the code itself from that page, and indeed have it locally. And then, of course, it's up to you to open it with a virtual studio code. I think that's it, VSCode, to open it and see indeed and to have it locally. Just for you to know, it's something that many consultants do at Odoo, also developers, of course. So they all have let's say a local version of the code on the computer. But it happens also that we go directly on GitHub if you want to take a look at the very new version and make sure that everything is working fine. Also, you can, let's say, do it a bit differently. So not to install Odoo, but not to, let's say, download Odoo, but you can also install Odoo. And at that moment, if we just make a reference to this page, so here I'm going to move in English, like this. So here, you have a small explanation in Linux and Windows to make sure to copy, let's say, the corresponding code in your computer. Yes, so here on Windows, it's about the download page. But I think the idea here could be that you could, at some point, if you install it through GitHub, make sure that you can, directly update the code if you want to make sure that you have the last version, or to switch from one version to another. If you want to take a look at the code in 17, 16, and so on. So that's something that you can do as well. So yeah, let's just take a look at the pages that you have online to see or to install the tool, and that would be enough. All right, next question. Yes, so from Com on LinkedIn. So how can you import products variants when you consider a product template with 10 to 15 attributes and 5 to 20 values for each attribute? In my case, it can generate up to a very large number of variants, but only 2,000 of them are really used by the customer. All the other ones needs to be okayed. I think, let's say that's something that that we face a lot also at Odoo when we come to project, because a lot of customers believe that the variance is the best way of playing with the tool. I think we have two axes to make it possible. It's true that we should avoid, to have, let's say, a lot of attributes and a lot of values. So that's the first thing. So being in a situation where we have 15 attributes and each of them have 20 values is not realistic, and something that's going to make, let's say, your database unusable at the end. So it's probably better to maybe think about reducing this number of attributes to a much, let's say, smaller number of them, and for all the rest of the attributes that you would not import like this, to just make them part of the product definition of the product name, so that you are sure to reduce it as much as possible. That you would maybe end up, with maybe, 200 products, and some of them have some attributes, that make it increase up to 2,000 at the end. So it's just a way, maybe here to think first about that use case, and I think that you have the right mindset, because you already know that most of those variants will not be useful. So just try to take a look at the 2,000 that are used, and try to adapt indeed the number of attributes and values. But indeed, I would not advise you to do it like this. Of course, the only thing that you could think of is that in the attributes definition, you can, decide how you want to create the variant. Is it dynamically? Is it never? Because of course, if you make instantly, you will get a lot of products that are not useful. You could indeed decide to set it dynamically. So if you just take a look, it means that each variant is created only when its corresponding attributes and values are added to a sales order, and never, you never create it. So it's always going to be referred to one specific product. What is a bit more difficult with the dynamic one is that if you do it like this, the creation of the variant happens when you add it to a sales order. But if you want to import the stock of your variant, it may be a bit more challenging. So you need to think about it, to make sure that you can still create at the end those 2,000 units in your stock. But yeah, maybe just think about this option and try to reduce as much as possible the number of attributes and values that you have on your product. All right. Then second question, next question about from Stefan on Twitch. I have a technical question about odoo.sh. You can restore backups or import backups, and Odoo will use the code that was used at the time of the creation of the backup, which is not necessarily the current version. If this is on a staging branch, even the rebuild will not put the most recent code back. It will take an empty commit or hard resetting the Git branch to the most recent version. Can this be done without using Git directly? So here you mean, so if this is on a staging branch, even a rebuild will not put the most recent code back. Okay. It will take an empty commit or add resetting to Git branch to the most recent version. So it's true that when you rebuild a staging branch, you will get, let's say, the data that are coming from the production database. So you refresh the data of your SH project, or of your branch in that case. But the code indeed is still linked to the staging branch itself. And I think it's also linked to the last commit that you performed on the corresponding branch. So yes, I'm not sure you could do it without using Git directly. I think that at some point, if you want to, let's say, come back to the state, the right state of your code for that corresponding staging branch, you need to make a commit accordingly on your repository. I'm just going to check if I can, let's say, see one of my projects that I have. So wait a second, I'm just going to see here if I have something that I can show you. Okay. No, I think, yeah, but just that I checked on the project etc., but I cannot really show you because it's part of it's an internal project. But yeah, I think the rebuild, as I said, is acting on the data itself. If you want to change the code and make sure that you have the last version of the code, you need to commit it again to come back to it. So that's something that we are used to, and that's something that we do also on our site. So yeah, that's the answer to your question. Okay, next question from Eki LS on YouTube. Hello, can you explain how to implement the Helpdesk module in Odoo for ticket management? What are the key settings to configure and the best practices to optimize its use? That's great, because actually yesterday I discussed with one of my clients regarding this app, so I think it's pretty fresh in my mind. So if I install the Helpdesk app to see yes, what we have, I think the first question that you need to think of is, okay, I want to put my Helpdesk, let's say, in place. What is the way that I can get to, let's say, receive my tickets? And so for that, if I open here, for example, my Helpdesk, I see that I have different options. Of course, I could decide to, on a corresponding Helpdesk team, to create tickets manually. I could decide to send the ticket to this URL, to this email address to create the ticket also automatically. And I have also the option, if I go in the settings, to go on the website page and have a form, to be filled in, to just create the corresponding ticket in my database. So 3 different options. That's, I think, the first, let's say, thinking that you should get when you think about the help desk is, okay, how am I going to receive my request in my database? What is nice is that if we especially think about the form here, the fact that this is, let's say, added automatically to the Odoo website is a very powerful tool, because you can afterwards decide to add fields on that form. For example, here. So if I add a new field, yes, it has been added at the bottom. I could decide to link this field to one of my let's say existing fields on my model. For example, I could take the tags here and make sure the person who is creating the ticket can select the right tag accordingly, and so afterwards it is my job, as a person in charge of the ticket, because I can directly identify which is maybe the tag, let's say the ticket that are the more relevant to me. Of course, you can still take into account that there will be some error performed by the client, but if the tags are not so explicit, but at least you reduce, let's say, that unknown behavior, and you make the clients even more, let's say, proactive in the way they create the ticket. That's, I think, the first indeed thing to take into account. Afterwards, just in terms of organization, you need indeed to create some different team regarding the different topics that you may address. Here, so for example, customer care and VIP support, if you want to have a very dedicated support for customers that want to have maybe faster help on the request. So here, basically, that's it. Each of these setups of the helpdesk team can be defined here, on which you can say, okay, do I put some automatic assignment? How should I take care of the visibility? I could also put a live chat in place on the website to make sure that everything is working fine. Here you have also some integration with existing apps. For example, with the knowledge library, if you want to be able to easily share some articles with your customers on the, let's say, in real time from the knowledge database. You can, of course, decide to timesheet and bill the time that you have if you link it, to the corresponding client at the end, to an existing, for example, pack of hours, or if you want to just invoice it at the end. I think here, it's just that in that case I don't have access to setup. Let's try if I do it. So now, if I activate that setup and I come back to one of my tickets in that team, great. Here, so I have my timesheet app, and I can indeed here link it to a sales order item of my corresponding client if I want, to deduce that time from the corresponding sales order item if they have no pack of hours for that kind of support. One last thing that is very important is what we call the SLA policies. So make sure that the tickets are handled in time, and make sure that you track as well, let's say your performance in terms of ticket management in your database. So here we can see that we link it, especially to our working hours, but at least we track that we want to put that in place. And here we can make some different status, at least some stages to put in place to say, okay, we need to have the ticket that starts at least in 2 days. And then that takes along 7 days to be finished. When we, let's say, set up this kind of process, afterwards it allows us to get some SLA success rate based on our team, and maybe compare it with the average rating that we get is a way to understand if yes or no we are reaching our goal, and maybe justify also why the average rating maybe not so good. So those are the tools that you have in the Helpdesk application that you don't have in some different application in Odoo. For example, the project app. And about the rating, it's just that here, of course, you have the possibility at the end to ask for the rating, of your client, especially when you for example, close the ticket, if you set the email template on the closing step of your ticket. So just go through the settings, make sure that you activate the ones that are relevant to you in that case. Think about, as I said, the input, or are you going to receive the tickets, and and try to figure out and to justify maybe the rating based on the SLA success rate, and at least define some SLA policies that make sense for your company with realistic goals that you want to achieve. Great. Next question from Michael. Is there a way to stop a user from creating a new record on the fly, where a user is unintentionally creating new products when they are in a sales order? Yes, it's true. Same. It's an issue that I know well because we face it a lot. Also, well, I face it a lot on my projects. Here, first, I'm just going to activate debug mode because I'm going to use Studio and I want to have all the tools on hand. But here, the first thing that I want to insist on is that the creation of products is linked to access rights. And if you take a look, especially here at the product template model and the access rights linked to it, you will see that people that can create new products are part of the admin group of those following groups, in my database in that case, but at least in your database you can take a look at who has this access. And here you have also a specific access rights for product creation that can be checked, on one specific user, even if he is not an admin. So that's the first point that is important to take into account, because that means that, maybe you can first think about changing the access rights if you want to remain standard, and maybe put someone with let's say a smaller access right to make sure that they cannot create product on the fly if they are not supposed to do it. But maybe in your case, what you tell me is, no, actually they should be able to create a product, but I want them to be very conscious when they try to do so. In that case, you can do it if you try to modify the view itself, and that's why with Studio that's something that you can do. So for now, you're right. If I just misspell IT technical team and I just type too fast, I create a new product. And if I don't recognize it and I don't see it, I could be in a situation where I confirm my sales order, I create an invoice. And so in terms of reporting, in terms of pricing and taxes, I could have many issues that are occurring. So a way of let's say changing it could be to open Studio, go in my list view of my order lines, select my product field, and here decide to, let's say, activate one of these options, which is to disable creation, let's say the whole creation of product, but also, or maybe just to disable the creation option of the product, so that if they want to create a product, they need to at least go and enter the edit option of it. So that they can maybe understand and make an error if they do so. So for example, if I start again and type ITT and I click on enter, now I have the pop-up that is opened that tells me, maybe I did something wrong. I can simply discard it and start again. Also, here if I do it again and modify the view to make sure now I want to disable any kind of creation of products in that case. Here, if I start again, and I type something that is not existing, I will not see any record at the same time, so I cannot create new product on the fly. But of course, I could go in my product list and still be able to create a product if I need to. So that's a way of doing it. And as I said, it's a change at the view level. So if I go there and take a look at the XML, I will see here that is what has been added automatically on my field. And that's something that you could do, as I said, without Studio, if you just create your own inherited view with that piece of code, with that logic, I would say. So to change in that case the attributes option and let's say make sure that the no open, no quick create and no create is set to true. Then you remove this kind of behavior. And so it's the case here on the sales order, but you can do it then at any different place in your database if you want to, let's say, prevent that behavior. But first, I would just insist on the fact that you need to check if the access rights make sense in your database, and to make sure that you are not fixing a wrong issue, because maybe it's just a question of access rights at the start. Okay, next question. I'm working from Aditya on LinkedIn. I'm working on a manufacturing order where I have created a BOM for a laptop with components like screen, keyboard, motherboard, battery, and body. However, the keyboard itself has a sub-BOM consisting of buttons, keyboard, lights, and a panel. I want to display both the main BOM and its sub-BOM components within the manufacturing order screen. Could you please guide me on how this can be achieved in Odoo? So if you mean by manufacturing order screen, if you mean this screen here that we have there, which is probably what you mentioned, it's true that the behavior is not going to be, let's say, really applicable, because this record is only focused on one specific product and so one specific bill of material. So it's going to take the information from this one. So you cannot really, let's say, assess not assess, but you cannot really make sure that you have different and especially details that are happening in it. What you could take a look at is especially maybe here the details and the overview of the cost. Maybe that could be taken into account. For example, here we can see that this product needs to be ordered. it linked to the purchase order that is linked to it. So we get the same, I guess, with the corresponding manufacturing order that's going to be planned. So in terms of cost management, that could be something that works. But it's true that if, let's say, my desk combination has a drawer black that needs as well to be, let's say, manufactured, you will get it on a different screen somewhere else. The problem is that you cannot really think of a way of let's say, answering your need, if once again I understood it properly. Because if you think in terms of logic, you could have in that case any let's say an undefined number of lines for the components on your manufacturing order, and each of them could potentially be linked to a let's say a sub-BOM in that case. So how would it work? Would it be that you have, let's say, a lot of sub-tables at the bottom with maybe, let's say, an undefined length? So in terms of view of database management is something that you can really do. And why also? Why would you want to see that? If that's because you perform two actions at the same time, then why not just putting all of the products and sub-products on the same bill of material for the main product, but maybe on the work orders you explain, okay, first you need to create the sub-product first, with those specific components, as you can add a description, and then you just try to manufacture the rest. So if that's, let's say, a way of working because you want people to know exactly what they need to perform at the same time, I would probably just play with the components and work orders to make sure at the end that you have the right process that is defined. Except for that, it's a bit more complicated. Also, what you could think of is that if you have all your manufacturing orders that are created on different record, of course, maybe on the shop floor, that's something that you can get a better overview. So if you go there and you take a look at any of the pages at the same time, here you would see indeed maybe your tabletop and your drawer that are on the same screen. So actually indeed you can see all the manufacturing orders at the same time displayed on the same screen, especially if they are linked as well maybe to the same work order, to the same work center as well. So yeah, to be investigated a bit more, but that's something that you could think of. But I guess you know what is the complexity behind it, in terms of display, and maybe here you have a few tips, to see how to do it differently. Okay, next question from Vigilantia on YouTube. Hi, I see that there is a kiosk mode. However, it often gets stuck on opening control. Can you explain the conditions or rules that may cause this issue and why it gets blocked? How to open it? I guess you mentioned about the point of sale and the fact that when you indeed, let's say, so here it's still open, so I'm just maybe going to pay it here by cash, validate, and to close my register now. So here and my cash count, I'm going to say 380. Okay, anyway, it's not a problem. So it's true that when you open a register, you always have this opening control. So that's your question. Could you explain the conditions or rules that might cause this issue? So actually, it's not an issue. Maybe what you have is an error regarding this opening control. Maybe it's not, the right question that you ask, or maybe not the right module. But here, this opening control is very important because it's a way to make sure that you start with the right amount of cash in your register regarding the last time that you closed it. So in terms of continuity of the cash, and make sure that it's properly recorded in your accounting. That's very important to take that into account. So here, that's one point. What you could have is true, is that when you, let's say, for example, open the point of sale from multiple, let's say, screen at the same time, which is something that you should avoid. And so ask one person to open it and then people to join it afterwards. But if you are in a situation where maybe people open them at the same moment, you can have, I think, some kind of control to be let's say, triggered, where indeed Odoo is going to check what is the real situation that you are in, and maybe try to adapt it as well at the same afterwards. So that's something that you are maybe referring to. So in that case, that's because maybe of a misuse that you have. But if you mention about the kiosk mode of the attendance app, in that case, I just don't know what you are referring to, because in my opinion, there is no opening control on the attendance application. So yeah, I'm sorry if I just didn't understand the question, but yeah, maybe just try to think about adding the name of the module next time. I guess you just, reply to one of the things that I said before, but yeah, it's maybe easier for me afterwards to know what we are talking about. Okay, great. Next question from Anna. No. Yes, this one is done. So it's the next one. No, it's not done? No, it's done. Sure. This one is done. So it's, yes, 24. How can I link the domain to the website developed in Odoo if the domain name is hosted by another company? Good question. Once again, it's a question that is pretty, let's say, common, because you always are in a situation, where a client is going to ask you, how can I, link my domain name to one of my existing domain name to one of my database in Odoo and one of my website, especially. For that, there is a very nice documentation that you can find online that's going to show you how to proceed if you want especially to configure an existing domain name at that moment. What you will see is that it's everything linked to a CNAME setup, to make sure that you map your Odoo database name with the website domain that you have. So that if people decide to type, the domain name of your existing website, they actually are redirected to the name of the database of Odoo. Because even if you change the domain name of your database, you will always keep here the domain name that you have by default. So your database name .odoo.com, it will always be there. Let's say hidden maybe, but still there actually. And so if you just set up your own domain name, you will be redirected to this one. And so that's by setting up a CNAME. And so what is nice is that here, depending on your provider, and so here we have 4 of them that are the most common one, you can just simply take a look at the corresponding documentation to make it work. In Odoo, let's say in the Odoo interface, the number of steps that you need to perform is very small, because you simply need to first, let's say, in your database settings here to add your domain name from that page. So use my own domain name and add it here. So that's the first thing that you need to do. And the second thing, once it is done, is to link it to the website itself. So here in the website settings, you see that you can add a domain name to it with a specific format. I think it tells you, this format should contain HTTPS and all the rest. Okay, so it should not only be mydomain.com, but the whole format. And then, your connection will be done if you, once again, perform the right CNAME setup in your provider. All right, next question. We want to sell an event. We want to put this as one line on the invoice, but it has 40% VAT low and 60% VAT high. Can we get this booked that way by adjusting the VAT code? But in the VAT return, the basis for both the VAT's percentage is fully included. So the basis should also be divided to 40 and 60. There is no control on the VAT rate with a certain margin for rounding, but in case of larger discrepancies, I would like to get notification with the corresponding entry for review. Okay, so what I understand is that okay. So you have, let's try to make it let's say visible. So you have one line, one invoice, okay, with one line. Okay, so let's make a line like this with a certain amount. And what you're saying is that 60% of this amount is taxed with a certain rate, and 40% of this amount is taxed with let's say computed with another rate. And so here you say 60 and 40. I guess that's something that is, let's say, always going to be the same percentage anyway. Okay, so here I guess you already managed to do it. But anyway, to make sure that you have the same process, if you go in the V8 in the taxes configuration here, you could probably, let's say, make it no. Here I don't see it because I'm not in debug mode, I think. If I go to debug mode and try to create a new tax, no, still not. Maybe it's a module that I need to install. What I would like is the possibility to, let's say, add some Python code on my tax computation. Let's try to take a look, because I guess on the runbot it will be available. So see what is the setup that I need to activate. Okay, create. Well, it's run, but it's not accessible anymore. So let's go to another one. Okay, let's go to the master version. Anyway. So here, if I go to my taxes, yes, so here I have custom formula in which I can, here decide to make let's say a smarter computation, which could be actually, to say, okay, I want 60% of my price unit to have a certain amount of tax rate, plus the other amount that has a certain amount as well of the tax rate. So that's where you could, let's say, manage the computation to be correct. And then it's here to apply probably the base computation to say, okay, 40% let's say of the base should be applied to one specific account and the rest to another one, or at least with a different tax rate, because of course the rates are different. But yes, but I guess it's not going to work in that case, because here the tax rate is still going to be computed, let's say like this. The question is not easy to be answered. The basis should also be divided to 40 and 60%. Yes, true. Let's try something, but I'm not sure I'm going to maybe be able to find an issue, a way of solving it in that case. Let's imagine, okay, so we have maybe the I tax rate, so I tax. Now we need to actually duplicate something that is already existing. So let's say this one is a low one. And this one is the I one. Great. So here, if I add my low and my high, and I take a look at the journal items, so for now, my computation is not correct, of course, because I still compute the 21 and the 30% on the same base. What you tell me is that no, it should be different in terms of what is used. What you could try first is to see here if I decide to change the tax rate that I have there. It's just a test to see if it's going to be different or not. So I will save and add it again. No, anyway, it's still going to be. This is another way to divide the line accordingly. Because I guess in your question, what you mean is that this line that we have here should be divided in two, depending on the tax rate that is going to be used to apply the computation. But I think this process then is not going to something that we will be able to achieve, especially here, because it's just base. So we cannot really divide the base according to a certain amount and a percentage. We can simply do it with the tax. So I guess we are a bit, let's say, stuck in that situation. And except of course, but you know that creating two different lines and assign the tax rate accordingly to each of them, I'm not sure we'd be able to do it with the tools that we have in standard. I hope I once again properly understand the question. But if that's the case, if that's the way, if that's what you wanted to reach, then probably that's something that you need to think in a different way. Just to take a look at the last part of your question, so there is no control on VAT rates for a certain margin for rounding, but in case of larger discrepancies, I would like to get notification with the corresponding entry for review on the VAT rates for a certain margin for rounding. So you mean that if the tax rate is going to round the amount to a certain value, yes, you want to have a control of it. Same, that's a bit complicated because you then need to make the control based on the margin computed on the rounding, which would mean like to compare two values, let's say the absolute values and the rounded values, and compare the value in between. Same. You don't really have that possibilities to have this kind of notification in standard to properly review, as you said, those values. But to be honest, I don't see in which case you have, let's say, such a large rounding that you have to check it out. So yes, sorry, maybe this question is not, it's a bit too complex, and maybe not, let's say, you should maybe discuss it even more to see how to solve it. But yeah, let's go to the next question. So on Twitch from Elitopia, so how is your accounting knowledge? In AD, 18.1, they change how payment reconciliation works. If I raise a payment to mark a customer invoice as paid, I now can't reconcile it in the bank. What is the correct process in 18.1? Okay, let's try to see what has changed. So I'll connect to 18.1 version. But can I? Yes, I can. Okay, here I'm in French. I'm just going to change the language. Good. So here what you tell me is that if I go to a customer invoice, so if I raise a payment to mark the customer invoice as paid, so if you mean this option here, so this option of course is not a reconciliation, a bank reconciliation. What it means is that you can mark the invoice as in payment if you know it is in payment, so you know that your client has paid it and you don't want to send some follow-up to the customer, for example, that would be not relevant. So in that case, indeed, you can create a payment and mark it as in payment. But it's correct that this process will not reconcile your invoice, so you still need to get a payment on your journal. So in that case, for example, my bank journal, if I create in that case, so an incoming amount of 299, like this, invoice, I cannot, well, I can, I guess, from that interface, select my corresponding invoice in my accounting here so that I reconcile it properly. And then I validate. And accordingly, if I come back to my invoice and I refresh it, now it is marked as paid. So I don't see, let's say, a big change on the way it is working in 18.1 regarding Odoo 18. Maybe you just do not proceed in the same way as I did here in my workflow. But that's the way I teach, all of my clients to use as well the tool. So it's to create the invoice, mark it as in payment or not, depending on the use case that they face. And then when they get the corresponding payment in their bank journal, they just retrieve the corresponding invoice and mark it as paid. So it should be the same. So yeah, when you say I cannot reconcile it in the bank, same. It just maybe depends on what you have. Do you have an error or doesn't it appear anymore? Maybe you can also check the type of your field, account receivable here, to make sure it is reconcilable. So if I this one, it should allow reconciliation to make sure that you can, of course, reconcile it. So maybe, this has been unchecked in your case. So check that part maybe. But except for that, I would not see why you would not be able to do it now in Odoo 18.1. Okay. Next question from Ali Baron on YouTube. I have a website in Shopify and I need to duplicate the design in Odoo. Can it be done? That's a good question because there is a tool that exists. Let me just find the link back. So that's funny because I discussed that yesterday with one of my colleagues. And so I have the link just there. So, which is this one. So here it's in Dutch, but I can make it in English like this. So it's a tool that you have now on Odoo that allows you to, let's say, enter one of your URL, a website URL in that page to submit it, and it's going to create a database with this website, in it, which is a conversion from one website to Odoo. So here it's a beta tool, okay? So it needs to be tested. It needs to be tested to see how it works, and also here you see it will convert like the first 10 pages of your website. So it's just a way to see, okay, is the tool working? Yes or no? Also knowing that you start from Shopify, so it's an e-commerce, so which is pretty also different as a standard website. So maybe it's going to work in a different way. So to be tested, and then indeed see if that's an option. If not, then of course to try to not duplicate things that are already existing, but try to reproduce it in Odoo in a way by using the website builder could be maybe a best practice, as I would advise. But yes, to be checked. This question we saw that's good. Yes, we already answered from Stefan. Yes, and this one. I am working on odoo.sh 16. How can I define requirements.txt file root files where my add-ons are? Well, if I were you, I would just take a look at how, let's say, the models in let's say in the GitHub are defined by default. So it's just that here I know where is the requirements text file, but I just don't remember where it is. So we need just to, what I could try maybe is requirements. I just don't remember where the requirements text file root is located. But what I would do in that case, just to show you the best advice, is just to take a look at the existing way of doing it from Odoo in the corresponding apps that are already there, and try to let's say adapt it in the same way as what you did in your case. Maybe I was just not in a folder where I have some requirements text file, but here, yeah, it's probably somewhere, but no, not demo. So it's pretty sure. No, but it's okay. Sorry for that. I could probably find it, but here I just don't want to waste time on that. But you probably know maybe where it is, and yes, try to duplicate what is already existing is a good idea. Okay. Okay. So next question, I see. This one we already answered. Okay. So next question in French, I will translate it, but how to print the product labels. So simple question. If you go on a product form, in that case, for example, this one, and of course, in that case, so here, if I go to someone that is not, let's say, that doesn't contain variant, here I could assign, for example, the barcode of it, my Apple Pie. Here I can print my label from that button here, which will allow me to get two different kind of file, either a PDF if I choose one of these options here, or a text file, a ZPL file. In that case, for example, if I print this one, I will get the corresponding, let's say, label in this document that you can then print as a normal file, in your database. But if you want to make things, let's say, a bit differently, you have a page here, Odoo Hardware Inventory, in which you can find all, let's say, the recommended tools to print labels efficiently, and especially this one, the label printers that we recommend that use a ZPL protocol that does not require any IoT box, so that you can just print all of your labels directly from that. So, I mean, that's why do we, let's say, suggest this one, is because the ZPL protocol is much easier to be customized and to be edited than the PDF ones, of course, where it's a bit more difficult. But of course, you could still try to print the PDF in that case. But if you have the choice, try to go for the ZPL, so that you are sure to have the right format. Just for you to know, the ZPL format is something that was like this. So you have some text, okay, with a specific, let's say, language that allows you to print the corresponding label on the right. And so, by just modifying the code on the left and just getting trained on that language, you can get exactly the label and the kind of label that you want, and then use, of course, as I said, the corresponding printer to make it work. So yeah, that's how you can print product labels. Next question on Twitch, Maria. Hello, is there a way I can delete session in point of sale that were opened and closed, or other lines from sessions? I have an error, but I was wondering if there is a way I can delete them. It's not so easy because those data may be linked to many different things. Like if you just open it, like you have a lot of connections with stuff in the database. Like you could have payments, you could have pickings of goods, you can have journal items. So deleting a session is not something that is, let's say, really feasible if I just try to do it here. Actually, I don't even have the button. That's funny. So it just made it impossible to be done. But that's also because it will not be possible to be done. So here, I would see two different situations. You could have one situation in which, like, you maybe had one session of the point of sale where things that were recorded were not correct. In that case, what I would do is simply to make some correction afterwards, like to correct the accounting entries that are generated with miscellaneous operations, for example, and we need to correct the stock as well of your product, explaining, in the inventory adjustment that you need to correct that part of let's say, a previous session that was mistakenly done. So I would more, act in a correction process to make sure that everything is tracked in Odoo than trying to delete a session, because it would have a lot of impact of side effects, that could be also a problem, afterwards in your database. So as a general tip, if you don't see the delete option in a record, don't try to do it, because you could be quite in trouble if you succeed to do so afterwards. Next question from Siddiq on LinkedIn. How to book closing stock entry in Odoo? So if you want to close your stock entry in Odoo, like you have, once again, two different situations that you could face. The first one is that you are in a logic with, let me go, maybe, I will just try to access my product categories here. Okay, so for now, I don't have the possibilities, but companies in the world can decide to be in two different kind of situations regarding the stock entry. No, so I did not activate the right option. So what I wanted to activate this. No, there's a lot of automation. Yes, this one, automatic accounting, regarding the stock valuation. So if you set it up like this, and then on your product categories, you decide to adjust and change the inventory valuation to automated, in that case, you don't need to do any closing entry manually, because every time that you will perform some stock move in between an outside location and internal location, you will create a corresponding entry in your accounting. But if you are in manual let's say in valuation, in that case, indeed you need to make it manually. The idea is that at the end of every, let's say, fiscal period, you need to make at least one, let's say, entry for your stock valuation. That will be the difference in between your stock valuation today versus the stock valuation 1 year ago, if, of course, your fiscal period is 1 year. So in that case, you would just go in your reporting in the inventory app and look at the valuation of your stock here. You can, let's say, take a look at the whole value. This is the total value of our stock valuation for now. And you compare it, as I said, with the previous value that we had 1 year ago. And we just create an accounting entry related to that in my accounting. For example, if I go there in my journal entries here, and I select my inventory valuation entry here, and I get, I just enter the amount in the lines of my entries. So that's a way of doing it like this. Of course, you need to make sure that everything is working fine. So first, that you have the right stock amount, let's say stock quantities in your stock. That's why also some companies decide, to make a recount of their stock at that moment to make sure everything is correct. And also, what you could do is make sure that each of your product categories have the right valuation costing method. So either standard price if you want to take into account the cost defined on the product form, or FIFO and AFCO if you want to make it, let's say, based on the entries of your stock, and in the case of FIFO, also of the output of your stock. All right, next question from Alex on YouTube. Hello, my issue is that when I use my own domain mail, I am not receiving any email into Odoo. Is there a configuration to make this work? Probably what you missed in that case is the setup of the catch-all parameter. The thing is that, when you send an email through Odoo, you, let's say, send it, of course, with a specific sender email address, but when someone tries to reply to it, it needs to reply to a parameter, which is called, in that case, we can find it in the system parameters, the catch-all parameter. Let me check if I can see it. Actually, I don't see it here. I'm pretty sure it's where it's located. Anyway, I mean, it's not a big deal. Maybe it's just located now in a different place, or maybe it's just because I'm on a testing database. I don't know. But so yes, so this parameter is very important, to make sure that the emails that are replied are going to be back in the database afterwards. And so for that, you have as well, let's say, outgoing email server odoo, some documentation online to be checked to make sure that you indeed manage all of these different situations, with specific documentation for Gmail and Outlook in that case. And yes, to make sure that these parameters are properly done. Let's try to see if there is something related to catch-all. Yes. You see, so here as I mentioned, the system parameters mail catch-all domain that you need indeed to make sure to properly set up. So all of it is defined, in this documentation. So I would advise you first to take a look at it and see if it answers the needs. But just to tell you, of course, that should be enough, because you're not the only one, of course, to use your own domain name, and usually the documentation is enough to solve this kind of issue. All right. Next question from Shoaib. How to restrict negative selling of inventory stock? It's a very huge problem for us. Can you tell the procedure, the process, how to do it? It's negative selling of inventory stock. Okay, so what you mean is, if I try to here create a sales order, but I just noticed that actually I don't have any quantities in my stock. Well, here the example is not good because this one is not, let's say, it's not storable. Let's say this one is working, and if I put 10, I will be in red. No, no, but that's because yes, I will not be able to find a good example here. Sorry, I'm just going to check what product I can have here. Product type, goods. Okay, let's take this one. So if I create an order for that product and I sell 50, I will get, no, still not 100. No, but maybe I need to save it. I don't know. No, why doesn't it work? Because the forecasted is larger. Okay, just that I need to insist a lot. 1000 in that case. Yes, good. So now I'm in red, and so indeed I have, let's say, a situation where I cannot, let's say, fulfill with the current stock the needs that I have. So if what you mean is, okay, if this icon is in red, I don't want to be able to confirm the sales order and to communicate it to the client. That's indeed something that you could think of. The only issue is that it's not standard, so you cannot really prevent people to do that. You can train them, of course, about not to do it, let's say, like this. Maybe what you could try is just to see if there is something, let's say, about the status. Maybe status, no. About the availability, no, not neither. So what I would try to investigate, is, okay, is there a way to, let's say, get information out of that field? To see if indeed or not, let's say, the status is in red or in green, and maybe to make a condition on the confirm field. For example, with an approval rule here, to make a filter to say, okay, I want to make it, mandatory to be validated by a manager, for example, if in that case my stock availability is, let's say, in red. But that's where the investigation needs to take place, is to make sure, okay, but how can I identify for a corresponding order that I have here not enough, let's say, goods to be filled in. I think the issue here is that, so here first it's on the order lines, so you can have many different lines, some that have, some quantities and some that do not. So you need to, let's say, go over all of the lines, check, the ones, check if one of them is not able to be fulfilled, and then what do you do? Do you let's say, prevent the sale of all the sales order, or do you do it only for this line? So the question is not so obvious to be answered, but then that's a logic that you could put in place with a bit of Python code to check all of the lines and accordingly prevent the fact of confirming it. But I'm not sure if it's exactly what you asked, but that could be a way to make sure and to prevent it at the end. Okay, I think this is it for this Odoo Insider session. So thank you to all of you for your questions. They were really interesting, and we got a lot of them, so that's very nice. And thank you for coming again and again every week. So next week it will be Antoine Nuvel, will take place here on the desk. Thank you very much, and see you later.